So you study how rules and water markets shape who actually gets water in the American West. If a friend or someone had no idea what that meant, how would you explain what you do in 1 to 2 sentences?
How would I explain what I do? Um, I guess I would say, yeah, something along the lines of what you just described. I study basically how yeah, rules governing natural resources impact how they get used. I have a particular focus on water and water rights. Um, and but also questions around land increasingly. So land, land rights, property rights to land, how they influence who gets access and how those resources get used. I mean, fundamentally, I think what we're really interested in is when it comes to managing things like water or land or other natural resources, is understanding whether and how different rules reduce waste, and promote better use of these natural resources.
All right. So you do a lot of work on California groundwater, obviously. And
Mhm.
was there one specific moment where you thought this was what I'm going to dedicate a part or a big part of my life to?
Yeah, definitely. Well, one of the things that motivated me to look at water was prior to that, I had been doing a lot of work on climate change, like really, really like high level questions in climate change and renewable energy build out, largely for climate mitigation purposes. And I found one that the questions were quite global, but then two, that the prospect of getting a global agreement about what to do about climate change was not very promising. Uh, and so then I got really interested in water because the questions are more local, which carries with it two implications. One is that, every river basin has its own set of demand side sort of needs for water use, and it has its own particular supply side landscape in terms of where does the water come from, how much water do you have, when does it arrive, stuff like that. So the problems are very local and they're locally unique. Therefore, the solutions need to some extent, be tailored to those locations. And because these problems are more local, the prospect of actually reaching agreement and stoking coordination and collaboration in the management of this resource is much more promising. And so that's something that really attracted me to working more on questions related to water and land management. Yeah.
Yeah. So, this is a little bit more of an intriguing thinking question. So, in your opinion, what's something a lot of people believe about Western water that's just not true or has little claims and facts?
Um, I mean, so one thing that you see uh sort of written in the media a lot is that the water is over allocated. Um, and it's a little bit trickier than that. Oftentimes, when people say that the water is over allocated, they just mean that the water is not allocated to a use that they think it should be allocated to. And on the other hand, the way it is true that many molecules of water are essentially allocated more than once, in the sense that, right, if I have a prior appropriation right to use surface water, I can divert 100 acre feet of that, for example. I may only consumptively use 60, the other 40 return to the system, and someone downstream uses them. So those return flows are indeed allocated multiple times, oftentimes, but not for consumptive use, only for withdrawal. And so, like, I guess I wouldn't necessarily say it's wrong to say that the water is over allocated, but when people use that phrase, they're using it in a very like not nuanced manner. And so I think that's potentially something that's not really accurate. In addition, you'll oftentimes see people say that, for example, in California, there was no groundwater regulation prior to the 2014 Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. That is also not true. While it is true that at the state level, There were no like very few actual regulations promulgated. There were regulations promulgated through law. I mean, groundwater, common law and groundwater has existed in California since essentially the inception of the state. And there have been groundwater rights adjudications and other local groundwater management planning efforts all across the state in many different areas. So that's also something that I think is not really true. I don't know, these feel like maybe
Yeah.
a little just like sort of debunking claims, but yeah, I mean, I think also, yeah, I don't know. I think
Yeah.
maybe that's a good place to start,
Yeah.
perhaps.
So the Salton Sea is shrinking, and you forecasted a
Mhm.
lot of the damages. Most teenagers my age, or a little older or younger, have not even heard of it. So how bad
Uh-huh.
is this gonna get, and how worried should a normal person be about these kind of events?
That's a really good question because I think there's quite a lot of uncertainty and there's quite a lot of controversy around what exactly is the role that the Salton Sea is playing in the air quality problems in Imperial Valley. So Imperial Valley has generally not very good air quality, but that is for a variety of reasons. One, there's pollution that basically drifts across the boundary from Mexico. There's just general fugitive dust that arises due to the fact that you're living in a desert and the whole area is covered in sand. There's pollution generated by the agricultural activity out there. And then finally, there is also pollution generated by the drying lake. Okay, so the lake is shrinking, the lake bed gets exposed, and then it generates dust.
Yeah.
There's a lot of disagreement about, well, there's a lot of uncertainty and therefore also disagreement about the extent to which the drying sea is driving local air quality problems. And some of these published estimates may range over an order of magnitude in terms of the total amount of dust that's being generated by the lake. And so I would say the failing of the Salton Sea has at least three major implications. One is the air quality piece. Exactly how big of a problem that is unclear. So if you look at there was a recent blog post on the Public Policy Institute of California water blog where they basically made the argument to researchers from the Pacific Institute, basically made the argument that if you wanted to make investments in Imperial Valley to improve air quality, there are other places to make more cost-effective investments than trying to control dust coming off of the drying lake bed. But anyways, so to get back to my list, one, there's that. Two, there is the fact that it is becoming a disamenity. So, meaning that it's rather, back in the 50s, people used to travel to the Salton Sea to go visit it. Nobody has any interest in doing that anymore um, because it is becoming too hyper saline, fish are dying, right? I mean, it's just kind of a nasty place. Three, uh, it may become, and has already started to become less attractive as a stopover for migratory birds. And so if you care about having maintenance of the Pacific Flyway so birds can actually survive their migratory journeys from north to south and south to north, yeah, allowing the sea to die would be yeah, like a negative development there.
Yeah.
Um, so how bad could it get? I That's a very interesting question. I mean, as California and other lower basin states are likely to be facing reduced deliveries off the Colorado River in the next, I mean, it's already happening, but increasingly over the next 10 or 15 years, then you could see reduced inflows to the Salton Sea, which would then sort of accelerate the decline. But I also have sort of an inclination to believe that the local community would find a way to either access state dollars to help speed up recovery, or to just buy water from farmers and dedicate it to the sea. I think that that's a likely outcome, especially if deliveries from the Colorado River continue to decline into the area. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was a very thorough answer. I've heard a lot of people talk about the water crisis like it's a future problem. Do you think it is, or is it already here?
I think there are two key considerations there. One, it's already here. It's been here for 100 years in the sense that finding a mechanism, like being able to design a rule set and like a market mechanism that effectively reallocates water is very difficult for reasons that we could get into and I could talk for 3 hours about. But like that has always been a problem. There's always been a problem about how do we effectively allocate water across competing uses like agriculture, the environment, and urban development. And and increasingly, those have become more acrimonious, largely because we have growing populations. They want to eat food, and increasingly, as they become wealthier, they care more about leaving water for the environment. But there are some things that make it difficult for allocation systems, including through the market, to like really function very well. Is it going to get worse? Probably, because populations are continuing to grow. Now, of course, we see in some places like California, people are moving away, but generally speaking, populations in the American West and other arid areas are continuing to grow. And climate change, to the extent, even if it doesn't change the total amount of precipitation, which in many areas it will, it's going to change the timing and the nature of the precipitation. So we're going to get more rain, less snow. That means that the timing at which the water is available is going to change. And both our current systems, in terms of the institutional systems and the physical infrastructure systems like dams, are not necessarily well suited to adjust to the new reality. So to the extent that there's a water crisis, right, this sort of potential waste through misallocation and just the political controversy and the problems generated by that political controversy are likely, or at least there's a risk that they could get worse. Yes.
All right, so if nothing changes, what do you think is the first American city or region that runs into a major water crisis?
Oh my gosh. Very good question. Let's see. I mean, I think it's important to remember that in a lot of rural places, in the American West, this is already happening. You have uh, forget even just forgetting about people who are on domestic wells, which is quite a few people. You have local community service districts who run into either issues of water quantity, like availability, or quality all the time. And so that's not a major American city, right? But it could be. It could be considered like a running out of water situation. Um, yeah, really hard to say. Let me just think for a second. I mean, I think you really have to look closely at a place like Los Angeles, because one, growing city, two, not a lot of local storage outside of the groundwater aquifers, but three, a very large proportion of their portfolio of water supply comes from outside the region. The State Water Project delivers a lot of water. The Colorado River Aqueduct delivers a lot of water. If for some reason those delivery pipelines were compromised and couldn't be fixed very quickly, then I think you would possibly run into a very big problem in the LA area. Now, the LA area is reasonably well networked. So even if you lost access on both the State Water Project and the Colorado River Aqueduct, the ability to like move water throughout that system, I think would buy you potentially quite a bit of time and the groundwater is there. But, you know, just the scale of the
Yeah.
number of humans using water there would possibly present a big problem. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a little bit more of a simple kind of baseline question, but in your opinion, on a scale from one to five, five being the most, how urgent is the Western water situation right now?
Um, I think that so sorry to do this, but I think there are two ways to answer that question. One is like essentially how big is the immediate sort of supply and demand scarcity problem? Like, are we in a drought essentially? So right now, in terms of, we're in the middle of the 2026 water year. We didn't get a lot of snow. It's not looking great. I would say it's maybe like a 3.5 because we do have a fair amount of storage, especially in California, that we can rely on for the immediate future, right? But I think the bigger problem where I would say we have something more like a 5 is what is the long-term plan for designing institutions and infrastructure for managing cha a changing climate and changing demands for water, reallocating water across uses? We don't do a great job of this. I mean, we need to find a way on the institutional side to make markets work better, like wholesale markets for water. And that includes wholesale markets to provide water for the environment. And we need to make significant changes to how we think about infrastructure for basically storing water in wet times for later use in dry times. We are not making enough progress there. And one of the problems that comes along with not making progress there is that it fuels political dysfunction in this area. So people start to think that water is managed in a zero-sum game, and they stop looking for opportunities to make investments or reallocate water that generate net benefits for all parties, and they start to essentially try to use the political process to take other people's water. And that is a road where if you go down that road, you're going to mismanage water for the next 100 years. And I think that's where we're at a 5 is in not being able, not making enough progress in shoring up the institutions and the infrastructure investments that are going to be needed to manage water in a more water scarce future.
Yeah, that's a very deep answer. I mean, a very basic question, but a lot of nuanced answers you can
Mhm.
kind of get there. So, in your opinion, this is just like a small question. What do you think one small thing a normal person or just a person, maybe not specifically in the California West, but in the United States or whatever, can do, something that they can do today that would actually make a small difference?
Mm, good question. Um, I mean, I guess one thing is, yeah, get involved with your local water provider. Learn where your water comes from. And I don't just mean when you turn on the tap, who sends you a bill, but rather where are they getting the water? What, like, is it coming from snowpack? Is it coming from groundwater? Right? Like, where is your water actually coming from? And how is it getting paid for? I would say learn about that. Because then ultimately if the citizenry is more informed about how water management actually works, then you'll have better engagement. You'll have less misleading public discussions about these sorts of things, and ultimately, I mean, I think that would be advantageous. Another answer is stop eating meat, but I am not absolutely certain that that will,
Maybe
land very
I'm a
well.
pescatarian.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I think probably go with the first one.
Yeah.
Learn where your water comes from
Yeah.
and yeah, how your utility is getting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, who are one or two scientists you think I should interview after you?
Um, yeah, great question. Phew. Um, if you're interested in wildfire topics, um, one person you might think about is Matthew Wibbenmeyer at Resources for the Future. Have you come across that name?
I haven't actually.
Yeah, so let me just make sure you got the right person. FF, and I will put this in the chat. And another is let's see. Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, maybe Brian Leonard at the University of Wyoming. Um,
All right, yeah, that's fine. I'll definitely reach
yeah.
out to them. So I like to end interviews with this question because I think it's very interesting. So if every teenager on Earth right now had to hear one last sentence, one concluding sentence from you, what would it be?
Um, oh boy. Uh, Teenagers. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing you might leave them with is something like for your generation, just like every generation, there are going to be a lot of changes. There's going to be a lot of adaptations and flexibility necessary to manage your society and resources and human capital and all of that. Finding ways and being committed to finding ways to stoke collaboration and improve coordination and do so through voluntary means is going to yield a lot of benefits. Yeah, so finding opportunities for win-wins, collaborations that generate benefits for all parties. If that's your guiding star, you're going to do well.
All right, well,
Yeah.
that's all I really have for you. I really appreciate you taking the time.